Hello, my name's Justin LeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we are discussing Marlon Riggs.
I don't know how to talk about this one.
Yeah,
I'm just going to say that...
We are white.
Well, okay, there's that.
And we are also heterosexual.
Okay, so there's that. There is that. But also, this is work that I think speaks very clearly for itself. Mm-hmm. And so...
Maybe we can find variations of it's very good.
Don't you think it's going to be kind of silly to be just stating the themes that are clearly expressed in these films and then saying, I agree?
Yes. But you could also talk about the way that it's constructed, why it is that emotionally resonant, because these are not just not all of them straight ahead. We're presenting you with this information in a way that no one has done it before. And I think talking about his story is also interesting of how he gets to these points.
It will be interesting to talk about the stylistic evolution of these films, which begin with, a fairly normal documentary style, if that makes sense, and then turns into something more experimental.
I think what you're thinking of is more of a public access style, if you will.
Or public television, like PBS style. But what I really want to do is get on my soapbox and say that the National Endowment for the Arts is funding pornography.
Oh, yes.
Your tax dollars,
George
Justin.
W. Bush.
I have my dear friend Pat Buchanan right here with me. And
a good man.
And we are going to crusade against 5,000 whole dollars of your tax dollars being used to fund filth.
All right, so who is Marlon Riggs? Because people may not have heard of him before.
Well, he passed away in 1994 at the age of 37, cut in his prime at a time when he was poised to become one of the country's most important black intellectuals.
And if you're wondering, wow, how did he die? I think you can probably take a guess.
Yeah, he was a victim of the AIDS epidemic. The last film that he made was completed posthumously, and seen today seems like a sort of grand unifying statement about everything that he was about. But something that unites all of his films is this feeling of being a minority within a minority. There's a sort of paradox or a complication, or I'm not quite sure what word I'm looking for. In his movies, he's simultaneously seeking to facilitate a grand sense of black solidarity and communion, a sense of, brotherhood and togetherness and solidarity among 40 million people in the United States, while also acknowledging and reckoning and struggling with the fact that any group of 40 million people can't really be considered one community. And so how do you reconcile those two,
Something fascinating about his movies is that, especially ones like Tongues Untied, which is probably his most famous film, is that his collaborators said that he wasn't trying to explain these things. Mm-hmm. He was just putting them up on screen so people who had never seen or could associate with it would then see it up there just without any kind of trying to make it presentable for regular audiences. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's really powerful about his stuff. It is such a pure vision in the way that it's presented. He often gets described as an experimental filmmaker, and I think that's true. But I went in this week watching these films expecting something even more radical, maybe even Stan Brakhage-ish in the way that he presents, and that's not what he's making. That he wants all of the elements working together to reach emotional crescendos, because again, most people watching this have never been presented with these things.
I mean, I've heard his practice compared a lot to Jean-Luc Godard and Haroun Farouki.
Yeah, his video work.
Yeah, the style of taking the qualities and, some might say deficiencies or what have you, inherent in video technology, and sort of using video technology like a sculptor would use clay, because it's a more direct, potentially, a more hands-on medium, an easier medium for...
Even though it's not that easy, because I saw some interviews where they'd be just to do one transition in between two images would take 3 to 4 hours to get it correctly. And you'd also have to be working in post-production facilities that the individual wouldn't have access to. So you could only do it through either favors of you would know someone who would give you access probably after hours, or if you were working at a production company like Marlon did, then you could get access to edit your stuff as well.
But a lot of these films are dealing with his identity as somebody who is both black and gay, and feeling ostracized by any community to which he could belong. So in these films, you'll often see, something that you see over and over again is clips of Eddie Murphy in Raw and Delirious, doing his homophobic comedy in those as symbolic of homophobia within black communities. But then he talks a lot about internalized homophobia within queer communities. He talks about, being in queer communities where the default is white, basically, and representations of black people in those queer communities are very exoticized, very otherized, very like Tom of Finland style depictions of black people in queer culture are often not that far removed from
racist
stereotypes that you would see in like the Jim Crow era.
But I do think that like that is a key part of his films. There's also a sense of community in them, like that comes out of like the funnier scenes that like these people do exist. They are ostracized, but they are present in these communities, which is why as well I'm making this film to present that they are out there.
Yeah, and the movies are very much about, even though they're expressing this feeling of alienation within these communities, they're about trying to find that sense of solidarity, trying to create a path for it, which is, it's interesting when class comes up in these films. It often comes up just in terms of it's just a barrier towards identification. You often see people, like he'll show you a lot of different people from different, spheres of the black community. And I feel strange saying the black community because as these movies show, there are many different sub-communities. But anyway, with that understood, you'll see people...
Will we put our foot in our mouths in this episode? Yes, I'm sorry.
You'll see people from the black middle class talking about how they feel alienated because people will call them an Uncle Tom, right? So that's his primary interest in class.
And even just the way that all of these people of these multiple communities interact with each other and have to come to terms that what is their identity. I do feel, though, that we're very smushing all of his movies into kind of one thing when that's not necessarily what they are.
Well, also important, too, is the sensual quality of the films and the stylistic experimentation of them. As we said, the first one... His first feature, Ethnic Notions, takes a fairly conventional PBS documentary style, but his second feature film, Tongues Untied, which I say feature film, it's like 55 minutes long.
Yeah, it's a feature film.
But it's dense and integrates a lot of elements of dance and poetry and experimental film.
Yeah, because like his films are... all the arts that interested him are presented in these films in a way that, especially Tongues Untied, it's a free-flowing style that goes in and out of it. The things in conversation with each other, but they're basically little sketches that are presented, reaching, again, that climax of all of it coming together. A lot of it, the backbone of, in Tongues Untied, Marlon himself talking about himself to the camera, which I was very interested to learn. That was something that came after in post-production where he found that it didn't have that skeleton. And so he didn't really want to sit in front of the camera and present himself and tell his story, but that's what he did. And that's some of the most powerful parts of that movie.
The last film that he made, Black Is, Black Ain't, is built, one of the primary metaphors of it is the gumbo. He uses gumbo soup as like a metaphor for black people, on the whole. But like stylistically, I think his films are very gumbo soupish as well, just incorporating all these elements.
Like in Tongues Untied, you have that whole sequence of a school to teach you like the different versions of the snapping your fingers of all of these people in the community and what it means to do that. And that's presented as basically a sketch within something that would then transition to him telling a very real story or some poetry being played over images to kind of instill that meaning in the viewer.
So a little bit about his story. He was born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1957. He was basically an army brat, spent his childhood moving to many different places. It was in his childhood when he developed that deep sense of alienation. He said in interviews, and he also says in Tongues Untied, that he felt ostracized by both the white communities and the black communities when he was growing up. He didn't fit in anywhere. This is a sense of ostracization that grew as he got older. In college, he realized that he was gay, but then he also... in the gay community. I mean, there's an incredibly powerful moment in Tongues Untied where I think it's him. He's talking about walking down the street in San Francisco on Castro Street. And, in this like sea of white gay faces, there's one black person coming up towards him and they studiously avoid looking at each other, which one would think maybe they would because they're both minorities within this minority. You'd think they would have this solidarity.
But he talks about that he wants to be absorbed in what is considered the normal kind of white mass, and so he avoids it.
And for the two of them to look at each other is to see each other's difference, basically.
And when you talk about Tongues Untied and the kind of like mishmash of styles, if you go back to his 57-minute film Ethnic Notions, which is, when people talk about it, they talk about how kind of like, straight ahead, dry, this played on public access TV show. I mean, it would go, even though that he did it independently. And when you watch it, you go, oh yes, I would understand why someone would have to make this independently, because it's a analysis through clips and just its depictions of the racism that has been prevalent for hundreds and hundreds of years in kind of popular culture.
Yeah, I mean, the thesis of this documentary in particular is that after the Civil War, from the Civil War to the present day, the media has been a necessary propaganda arm of white supremacy. And it's been broadcasting two primary archetypes of African Americans, which is that they are either childishly entertaining and subservient, or they're vicious brutes. You look at Birth of a Nation and you see both types side by side. And so there are certain archetypes, the Mammy, the Sambo, the Pickaninny, these are archetypes that recur over and over again. You see a whole array of imagery from like cartoons of, watermelon eating, that sort of thing.
And there's an interesting historical perspective that like, oh, this is where it started. How does it evolve? How does media just kind of jump into it, absorb it, make it okay? And then it continues, and you can say, well, it's not racist, right? Because it's been around for so long, and someone would have said something at some point.
Well, something that I found, very fascinating was, so the minstrel show starts with white people, but then, the minstrel show becomes this avenue where black entertainers...
It's the only way they can do entertainment. They have to put on grease paint, a real bamboozled, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they get in through that way, and then it gets to the point where, okay, well, it's not that racist, is it? Because
they're doing it.
They're doing it. But then also, like, for the white audiences that they're performing to, it's like they don't necessarily want to hear, those white audiences don't want to hear, serious poetry or dance or thing. They want to hear
the minstrel show.
Yeah, they want to hear what was then called, quote unquote, a coon song, which is such an ugly term, but like that's what it was called. And so then you get, I don't think this documentary mentions it, but in the first half of the 20th century, who are the big black movie stars? It's like Mantan Moreland, it's Sleep and Eat. And then there's a whole complicated legacy about people like that because, well, those were the only opportunities being offered them. They were doing the best they could under
those
system,
circumstances,
to provide some sort of representation against
but by consequence, it was just continuing the image of what, popular culture treated the black person as.
And then that gets co-opted, like you see Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer, where it's like the suffering of black people then gets co-opted,
into a Neil Diamond movie, which then The Simpsons will not stop making parody. Isn't it wild how much Jazz Singer material is in The Simpsons?
I love it.
That there's a whole Krusty episode that's just about that.
I think what I found most troubling about this documentary, Ethnic Notions, was...
What did you find the most troubling, Will?
Well, so you see clips of, Bugs Bunny in blackface or, horrible like Sambo cartoons where they're eating watermelons and stuff. And that's obviously like disgusting. But at the end of the movie, there's some sort of uncertainty about, there's the idea that these stereotypes continue to linger, they continue to evolve. One of the talking head interviewees says words to the effect of, in the 70s, you'd have an archetype like the black cop who has license to be more violent, to be more vicious, because deeply ingrained in the popular consciousness is the idea that, well, black people are more violent, they're more brutal. Now, you hear that and you also think, well, in the 70s, there was also Dirty Harry. So, like, if there's Dirty Harry, why can't there be Shaft? But
that's, well, why. That's like somebody saying, oh, listen, I may be insulting to black people, but I'm insulting to everyone. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way, man.
But, I actually think, I do think it's troubling because it's like, well, how do you get around this? Do you remember maybe 10 years ago when Spike Lee and Tyler Perry had this big war of words because Spike Lee was asked about Tyler Perry and he said, well, I think there are some people out there doing coonery buffoonery. He's talking about Medea, this like guy in a dress doing shenanigans and stuff, and he thought that was in the lineage. Or at the end of this documentary, you see a bunch of what was then current day black culture posters and stuff, where it's like Beverly Hills Cop, it's Bill Cosby on the Cosby Show, and it's like there's still so much discourse about, well, okay, Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby in the 80s were doing a sort of respectability politics, but then, you know, that comes from a racist context where
that you have to be the best.
Yeah, you have to be the most upstanding. So then, you know, why can't there be Shaft? But then, you know, as we said earlier, I don't know. I found it troubling that it's like, okay, well, how do you get out from under this?
Yeah, I mean, he tackled it again in 1992 with Color Adjustment, where he went more into like their present and talked about the portrayal on television and what it meant to be like black and how are they actually characters in mostly television.
You know, it's hard because like obviously these stereotypes like were a tool of white supremacy for so long. And then you get to the point where it's like you see, I don't know, Chris Tucker in Rush Hour 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, this feels like it's in the tradition of Mantan Moreland, but it's also in the tradition of Jim Carrey. And
but I don't think we're the people that are going to crack it on this episode.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is something to consider. And yeah, I feel
it's
like
something to consider.
I feel like people that are
only time will tell.
Could there perhaps be some kind of academic dissertation that is analyzing this kind of stuff? I would say perhaps. You'll just have to look for yourself.
Listen, I'm just a bozo, and
oh yeah, it's time for us to we're just blue collar podcasters.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. You can't criticize us because we're saying that we're idiots.
Yeah, and trying to tackle a heavy subject, if you will. So Tongues Untied, this is probably his most famous film. Again, 55 minutes. We covered a little bit of it. I think we need to be clear of how powerful it is and how digestible it is as well. The classic refrain we have anytime we talk about it, a slightly experimental filmmaker.
Yeah, that it's actually very accessible.
It's actually, you know, something that a little challenging, but we would recommend it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And it's one that I find it fascinating that he made it with no audience beyond it playing in a couple of local gay bars. Like that was his goal for this film. And that's why, like, you know, shot on video, presented in the way that it is, he wasn't having to like follow anybody's rules or expectations of what the movie is, which is why it feels as pure as it does.
Don't you feel that the shot on video, I mean, I would have loved to have seen him work with a lush 35 millimeter color palette.
But what you're trying to say is it feels more immediate because it is shot on video?
Yeah, I do. It feels intimate in a way.
Yeah, well, because shot on video is something that you associate unconsciously with PBS or home movies, and to see these things presented on that, there isn't the distance of like, you know, you have certain expectations of narrative. I know documentaries were shot on film as well, but when you see that video style, you instantly associate it with that. And that video style that he shot it with is not what digital video looks like now. It's something that feels to us like older and more present. And that's why it, you know, you just fall into it. And then after Tongues Untied, did you watch Anthem, his little 10-minute short?
I didn't.
Very good. Yeah. It feels something that could have been like almost a part of Tongues Untied, very kind of like musical and all the overlapping dialogue, emphasis on dance as well.
Yeah, so Tongues Untied, it should be mentioned, Marlon Riggs is a significant presence in the film as a narrator and as a sort of poet. There are a lot of others as well. There's Essex Hempel, Willie Ninja, people from the Black Gay Men United, a lot of different voices telling their stories within this context, interwoven with scenes and clips and home movie footage of gay life and also the culture of black mainstream entertainment throughout the 1980s. That's where the Eddie Murphy footage comes in.
Also some Spike Lee footage as well, speaking of that, from School Ties. But I think we can move right to Black is Black Ain't, his last film, because it's just an extension, and some would say even a kind of honing of what was present in Tongues Untied.
Yeah, and this movie has an interesting story because it was made while he was dying of AIDS. In fact,
he's presented in bed most of the time.
We see him from his hospital bed, and there's a bit towards the end where he's talking about this dream that he has about being visited by Harriet Tubman, and where he's talking about what he wants the rest of his life to be. He basically says that he wants to spend as much of his time on Earth as possible thinking about how he can create that sense of solidarity among black people. But then he says, you know, words to the effect of, I know there's going to be a point where I just have to go home. And at that point, I just want to be with my friends. I want to be looking at the window. I want them to hold my hand and, you know, rub my head while I slowly die. It's heartbreaking, you know?
Especially when you realize that he didn't even get to complete this film.
It was completed by his colleagues kind of in his spirit. So it feels like this sort of dispatch, you know?
I mean, that's all it could be.
Yeah.
It basically starts with him in bed kind of, talking about himself. He even gets into the nitty-gritty details of like, when I eat, I get bloated and I have to put a hot pad on my stomach to be able to digest the food.
And there's an unfinished quality to the film too that, I mean, the issues that it raises are irresolvable. And the movie's thesis is both as simple as we need solidarity among Black people and as vast as...
But like what is a Black person? Like,
exactly.
How do you... and there's a lot of conversations about that.
There's a quote that we see on screen, by Malcolm X, where he says there are 1,000 different colors in Black folks. And like, that's what you get in this movie. Not just literally, but also like there are so many different communities and stuff. It's 40 million people, you know?
And as you said, maybe that image of a gumbo we keep going back to could be a visual representation of some sort.
Yeah.
Of all mixing together. But I do feel like Tongues Untied that by the end there is a sense of like not complete doom and gloom, that there is like, some people are able to find their place through different means and find themselves whole in a sense when it comes culturally and how they represent themselves to people that they feel comfortable with. And I think that that's why his movies, when we say, they're kind of accessible, is that as emotionally draining as they can be, there is also a sense of hope and happiness in moments of it.
Well, the main takeaway of Black Is, Black Ain't is it's there in the title. As a gay Black man, he was constantly facing this, you see not just the Eddie Murphy clips, but there's a quote by Ice Cube that comes on the screen where he says,
are you going to say it?
No, he says
No.
he says a harsher version of real Black people aren't gay.
Yeah, okay.
And you can fill in the bad words there. And really the overwhelming takeaway of this documentary is he's trying to chip away at that notion and say, no matter where you are, whether you're gay or straight, whether you're of this social class or that social class, there needs to be a baseline understanding that it's all Black, and there's no you're more Black than me, I'm more Black than you. And that has to be chipped away.
And he talks a lot about and a lot of the representations of Blackness are defined by white people through popular culture.
That's right.
And how do you get beyond that or become understanding of that
in
your own representation?
It's like so many of the representations are defined by white people. So much of the history and the terminology is defined by white people.
And that's why we're doing this podcast today. Two white guys.
Yeah, we're going to define his oeuvre. I mean...
Well, I think that his work, have you been aware of it before Criterion put it out?
I saw Tongues Untied in class many years ago.
So they showed it too, yes, yeah. But I think that now it's never been more accessible. It's probably on the Criterion channel, right?
Tongues Untied is on the Criterion channel. The other ones I had to go out looking for.
Oh, because I have the Blu-ray.
But they're on Blu-ray, yeah.
Yeah, and the set is very good. There's it's the Criterion of old. There's a big, thick booklet that comes with it. There's multiple interviews with his collaborators and academics who really shine light on the process. There's an interview with him. There's a making of documentary. There's a documentary about him that came out in the 90s. It is the full package. And it's a little bit depressing to consider, everything you'd want here. Yeah, it's because he only lived to a certain age, didn't have that much work, so it can be collected all in this. But if you want to explore his work, or at least, getting started, that's where you want to go to, because, man, it's very powerful.
It's like a life in a box.
Yeah, exactly. So would recommend checking that out. So as per usual, you can send us emails at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com.
That's right. Questions, comments, queries.
Maybe not about the episode that we did today.
Hey,
We're sorry. We tried our best.
We're trying our best.
Yeah. All right. So our first email is from Clayton, and he goes, "Hey, Important Cinema Club host, long time, first time. I began my foray into cinema around a decade ago when I picked up a copy of 1001 Movies to See Before You Die and started working my way through as many of the films as I could get my hands on. A few questions related to this effort. Thoughts on books like 1001 Movies and related works. I know you're big fans of cult flicks and trash flicks, which I've purchased based on your recommendation. I don't know if I recommended it.
Video Hound cult flicks and trash picks. I mean, that was great for us when we were when we were kids, and we were just trying to find out what the cult movie canon was.
I still have a copy, but it's only a nostalgia. I'm not flipping through that to see what the Hound thinks of certain movies.
I think books like that have their place, though, and I would include 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die.
I love that book, actually.
It's good because it has actual real good writers.
Jonathan Rosenbaum's in there.
Exactly.
And it has movies that you're like, I've never heard of that movie, and that's what you want from those books.
It has weird stuff. Like the edition that I have made sure to have stuff like, Project A.
Yeah.
Mondo Kane is in there. Like
It's a
strange
great
stuff.
list.
Yeah.
Now, the letter continues. What do you like and not like about the existing 2001 movie list? You can find a comprehensive version. He links it. I think it's on Letterboxd, which includes all the films from all editions. But as people may not know, if you don't know the book, that every year they do an updated one and they kick movies off the list.
I think, yeah, so I do know that. So I don't know what, I have the 2007 edition.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's much changed. What I do know is every year when they put out that book, the movies from like the most recent years.
Yeah, but they're going to get kicked off right away.
They get kicked off instantly. And I say, don't even include those.
No, because it's like The Artist or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're like, ugh.
I actually think like the thing should be at least 5 years old to get in there.
The edition that I have has an interesting kind of like intro discussion about why they pick certain movies when they do updated editions. And some of it is like, there's a lot of movies by this director, and it's like, I'd love to have Hitchcock's Spellbound still on this list, but like, we can kick that off.
Right.
And like, the list still exists. Like, if you go online, you can find every one that was on there.
Is Clerks still in there?
It's got to be, right?
I hope
don't think
so.
they would have gotten rid of Clerks. That's a really defining movie of the 90s, and one of the greatest films probably listed in that book.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
If anybody
Psycho
does want a like recommendation list, I really like 2001 Movies Before You Die, and I even went through and like checking stuff on the back of movies that I've seen or not.
I do think there's value, to having certain books and certain lists that, I mean, we all know the canon is problematic, but I do think like when you're trying to figure out what the movies are, it's good to have certain lists like that.
And I do think 2001, like the list, the book is good because the essays are good in it. Like they're short, they're concise, but they're also providing enough context or even ways to approach the film to make it like interesting. The letter writer continues, for better or worse, I'd never have watched Birth of a Nation, Nanook of the North, The Jazz Singer, or any number of other racist early film classics without that book on my shelf.
Well, that's great, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, those are, have you seen The Jazz Singer, the original silent version?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never seen it.
I think we did a Patreon episode.
Wait, did
about
we?
it. Yeah.
Oh, then I have seen it.
It's not very good.
No, it's bad.
I mean, Birth of a Nation
that's how memorable the film is, that it literally like...
Al Jolson is just an incredible figure because you hear...
You needed to see him live, Will.
That's what they say. They say, man, if you saw him live, he was the world's greatest entertainer. He did 10 encores. But then, like, you watch the footage and he's like, Mommy. It's like the lamest shit ever. I don't know.
But we have to say, you don't need to watch those. There's a lot more movies to watch before you've gone through the list. And, you got to get to those ones.
Yeah, I mean, Birth of a Nation.
Watch Intolerance. His apology for Birth of a Nation, right, Will?
Yeah, that's what it was, wasn't it? Birth of a Nation, well, you know what I would say? Go on YouTube and watch, like, the Civil War battle scenes.
Yep.
That's some good stuff.
Like the last half of or the last chunk of Birth, when it's just basically a serial.
Well, the last half of Birth of a Nation is some of the most noxious, evil stuff ever.
What happens if we let them into the government?
We are heroically taking the iconoclastic stance that Birth of a Nation is bad.
Do you think Birth of a Nation is still shown in film schools to this day?
I don't think it is. What I think they probably do is they show clips.
Yep.
Yeah, which they probably should. I mean, it's, at some point, it's a kind of immovable object of film history, but I would say just show clips. Don't make people watch the whole thing.
Ugh. Anyway, the letter finishes up. Thanks, Clayton, Important Cinema Club Patreon supporter Fletcher. I like how he put that part into his email. Let us know, so we will definitely read your letter if that part is included.
Yeah.
Next letter is from Juan, and he goes, Hey, Justin and Will, I wanted to know if you two would ever consider an episode on either Lassie or Rin Tin Tin.
Maybe, yeah.
You're a dog man.
Yeah,
so
not those dogs specifically.
No,
but
yeah, you have an anti-golden retriever bias, or?
Well, I've just never seen any of their movies. I'm sure they're good boys.
Is there any kind of French bulldog related movie? Because then Will would all be in it.
So I think, was it Susan Orlean, I think, wrote a book about Rin Tin Tin. I would be curious, like, what is the take on Rin Tin Tin? Why is Rin Tin Tin
I've never seen a Rin Tin Tin film until you were like, Justin, we did 3 Patreon episodes on it. The letter continues, when one thinks of cinema's greatest animals, they are the most referenced. Are they? I mean, maybe Lassie, but like,
well,
I'd be shocked at anyone our age that has seen more than one Lassie film that's not some kind of freak.
I would think, if I were to ask you, Justin, name cinema's greatest dog, who would
Old
you
Yeller.
say? I would say Toto.
Toto?
From The Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. Yes. I think I was thinking of films that center around a dog.
Right.
Clearly, the 2 dogs and a cat from Homeward Bound.
I would like to salute all the dogs killed during Milo and Otis.
Oh, so many, yeah.
So I think I'm going to give them the number one spot just as heroes, as fallen comrades.
The letter continues. What say you both do an episode on either those two canines or maybe episodes on animal-led films? Lots to choose from, such as Benji, Milo and Otis, Homeward Bound, or how about an episode on Bart the Bear? I mean, once we do our bear episode...
Man, I admire Bart the Bear so much. He's a great man, especially...
Was it Bart the Bear in The Edge?
I was about to say.
He had to work with Alec Baldwin?
Yeah.
Terrible.
I think Bart the Bear gave a great performance in that film. Great David Mamet script. I kind of like The Edge, you know?
I like The Edge, too.
But yeah, to what the letter writer was asking, I would be down for an episode on at least one of those canines. Rin Tin Tin, perhaps. I think it's a good idea.
Watch that episode we do on dogs get like 10,000 hits. That's the one. We're switching to an all dogs podcast.
Hashtag dogs, hashtag canines, hashtag dogs of Twitter, hashtag dogs of Instagram. By the way, I want you to know that Justin is reading these letters for the first time.
No, I've read
we're
these.
Recording.
I star them, and then I have to go through and be like, which letter is this? That's what I'm doing.
That's how many letters we get now, guys.
No, we want more letters, please. So the next letter is from Kay, and it goes, Hey guys, I have a question for you which might be too boring because it pertains to Vancouver, sorry. How do you feel about Vancouver?
I've never been.
Really?
No, I love it in Rumble in the Bronx.
Yeah. I live in Vancouver, sorry. I don't think you need to apologize for living in Vancouver.
Fine. Don't worry about it.
And I'm constantly envious when you mention yet another independent cinema, film event, or distributor within Toronto, not to mention all the events and locations just over the border. In Vancouver, I am aware of the Rio and the Cinematheque, but do you know of any other locations or events here? Is there a roiling underground cinephile scene that I'm missing out on, or do I have to start making day trips south of the border? I have even started having friends over to our apartment rooftop to have a movie marathon via cheap projector. Thanks for everything you do. I constantly find myself sending friends episodes and moments and have made you some new fans. You're welcome. All the best, Kay. Thanks, Kay. I'm not that familiar with Vancouver film scene, except for the Rio, which rules.
So I have two things to say about this. First of all, most of the Hallmark Christmas movies are shot there. So that's pretty cool.
You can see Fred Olin Ray wandering your streets.
And what I would say is, since Fred Olin Ray is there, I think sir, it's your obligation to create the film scene in Vancouver. You can do it. And I know that because the film scene here in Toronto was built by just normal, humble, hardworking people like Justin here, and to a lesser extent me.
Even though I don't get any invitations to any of the screenings.
Justin keeps getting sad and saying, why don't I get invited? I think, okay, I'll start inviting you.
Yes. And then I'm like, oh, I'm busy. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what you'll say. You'll say, oh, I'm busy. I don't want to go. Yeah. Okay, I'll invite you more. Fine.
And then I'm always going to be there. It's like, oh, Justin's here again.
Yeah.
And then, there's the puff of smoke where Justin used to be the second the movie ended.
No, listen, this is, from now on, you're getting invited to anything I go to. You're going to be there. And
with a smile on my face. Can't complain.
Yeah, you'll be so happy. You'll love everyone.
We could talk about all our favorite political stuff. I'm jumping in the conversation.
That's right. So I would say, sir, go where the cinephiles are. There have to be cinephile meeting spots.
Hey, you know what? I think there's a bunch of Vancouver people in our Discord too. So jump on, just ask them.
And I say start brainstorming. Make it as easy as, what about movie night at a local bar?
Yep.
I think you get some people together, you can make that happen. Boom. The film scene starts growing. And
it's wherever you are.
It's wherever you are. There is a film community just waiting to be activated.
Mm-hmm. So like even your local library, if you can't get a bar, you can probably rent a room for pretty cheap, if not free, and you start a movie night.
And what I would say is you won't get many people out at first.
No. For the first year.
You may not ever get very many people out.
But if you get one or two, and you've
got yourself a community, and this could be the building block of something greater.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, and join us in the Discord and ask around, and hopefully you can maybe even make some connections, if you will. We're not legally responsible for any connections made in the Important Cinema Club Discord. All right, so what are we talking about on Patreon this week, Will?
Well, on Patreon, we're doing our regular monthly discussion of stuff we've been watching lately. A little jam session where we talk about movies that are too strange, too weird, too evil, even.
Too evil. So what Will's trying to say is he watched The Real Cancun again.
I watched The Real Cancun again. In a bar.
Yeah.
This is what made me think about this. Yeah. Exciting things are happening everywhere, including bar screenings of Real Cancun here in Toronto. So you'll hear all about that.
We don't recommend to the person who sent in the letter to play The Real Cancun.
You know, The Real Cancun is, it's like, have you ever seen The Wages of Fear? It's like the toxic shit that they're transporting in The Wages of Fear. It's like, it's dangerous.
You're
but
technically the truck watching it.
It's dangerous, but it's powerful.
So check that out. Patreon.com/TheImportantCinemaClub.
Also, I don't think we mentioned that we have a recent Patreon episode where we're talking about The Blob from Steve McQueen.
Oh, did we not mention that?
Why did I say from Steve McQueen? He stars in it.
Yeah, we went to Blobfest. We talk about the Blobfest experience.
In Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Blobfest, one of the greatest events in the world. Maybe I'm overhyping it.
Yeah. Well, you can hear us talk about it on the episode. We spent about 10 minutes on Blobfest, 10 minutes on the Blob itself. So check it out, patreon.com/TheImportantCinemaClub. What better subject to follow up an episode on Marlon Riggs, Will?
Well, we're going to be talking about Bob Hope. And
I mean, I'm probably laughing more than I will be watching the movie, let's be honest.
so I've never liked Bob Hope.
Now, I'm surprised about that. You never found a way into Bob Hope?
That's kind of what I'm hoping to get this week, because there are individual Bob Hope movies I like Son of Paleface, but that's more of a Frank Tashlin.
That's more of a Frank Tashlin film, yeah.
I don't like him very much. And I've done some work. There was a big biography of him that came out a few years ago. I read that cover to cover, and it's fascinating. He has an amazing life.
Now, Bob Hope, if you look at it, I know that people, argue about how popularity is organized on Letterboxd. It is wild, though, what is at the top. You will never guess. So, we talk about Bob Hope. Most people may know who he is. They may not, probably have never seen one of his films. When you're talking about, he was a megastar back in the day.
Bob Hope, it's not too much of an exaggeration if you were to call him the most popular comedian of the 20th century.
And now, way more people watch and think about Jerry Lewis than they think about Bob Hope films.
That's probably true.
So here's what he has 170 films credited.
Can I guess what number one is?
You will. Okay, go ahead.
Spies Like Us.
No.
Okay.
The Muppet Movie.
Okay.
You know what's number two? Los Angeles Plays Itself. Not a Bob Hope movie.
Okay.
And then number three, I can't believe it's number three. DeMille's The Greatest Show on Earth.
He's in that?
I guess so. I guess people, Fableman's Fever, and they're like, what's a movie that's in the Fableman?
That's people who are just watching all the Best Picture winners.
Number four, Spies Like Us.
Okay.
And I didn't talk about...
What's the highest ranked Bob Hope movie?
The Paleface.
Okay.
And then followed by Road to Morocco, The Cat and the Canary, The Ghostbreakers, Story of G.I. Joe, Road to Bali. There's a bunch of that's Entertainment 3 that's interrupting them.
Okay, so I want to find a way into Bob Hope because there are some, basically Woody Allen actually cited him as his greatest influence as a performer, which is weird.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously he was hugely popular. I associate Bob Hope mostly with those specials from Vietnam.
Well, you know what? That's number, I think, 4 or 5 on his list. Hearts and Minds from 1974.
Oh, the documentary about the
Vietnam. Yeah. It's not about him doing the show. It's actually about...
So I associate him with, he's a court jester for power. But I want to see... So here's my proposed itinerary. We watch The Cat and the Canary, which looks like it might be fun. We watch Road to Morocco.
The most popular one, yeah.
I've never seen any of the road movies. Let's do this.
Okay.
And then we watch a late one. So should we...
Why? Why?
Okay, we don't have to.
No, okay. Let me look at what his late ones are.
Because I was going to propose...
Is there a notorious late one? I don't think so.
Well...
All right, we watched the Jack Frost special he did with Dana Gould.
I've seen that many times. Okay, so here are two ideas. We could watch Boy Did I Get a Wrong Number, which is in the 50 Worst Films of All Time book.
Okay.
Or we could watch Frank Tashlin's final film, The Private Navy of Sergeant O'Farrell.
Does he have a serious one? Is there a serious Bob Hope?
There is a serious Bob Hope.
Story of G.I. Joe.
No,
right?
I don't. That's a John Ford movie. I don't think
he's probably barely in it, yeah.
Okay, no, the serious one is The Seven Little Foys, which is kind of his Yankee Doodle Dandy. And in fact, okay, get this. Jimmy Cagney is in that movie as George M. Cohan. It's a Yankee Doodle Dandy
multiverse universe,
cinematic universe, and they do a dance and everything. I think that's as close as we get to serious Bob Hope.
Okay, if there's any Bob Hope experts out there that are like, oh, this is the one that you have to watch,
or we could just watch The Paleface. I don't know.
I've seen The Paleface. I can watch it again, but it's good.
Okay,
it's a Frank Tashlin. Well, no, he wrote the first one. Who directed the first one?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, but I know he wrote it. He was involved in it.
So, do you want to suffer, or do you want 3 that might be pretty good?
I mean, we always have to suffer a little bit. So yeah, let's do the final Frank Tashlin movie,
the Private Navy of Sergeant O'Farrell. This one is gonna hurt.
I mean, here's the thing: anytime we watch these late period ones, we always come back and Abbott and Costello in their last movie, they're bad.
Yeah, they're always bad.
But maybe it will distill what the Bob Hopiness of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hopefully...
It'll be interesting to compare to one of the early ones, I think.
All right, so that's it. Sorry, I'm just looking here. Not With My Wife, You Don't. This is not a Bob Hope film. Tony Curtis, George C. Scott, Carol O'Connor.
Wow.
Bob Hope is like tense build.
So many forgotten movies.
Yep. I mean, is Bob Hope one of the great forgotten comedy stars?
Well, everybody knows who he is.
But they've never really experienced his comedy, have they?
Yeah.
Well,
and there's a reason.
We'll find out. Maybe we'll come out, we're like, we love Bob Hope. He's the best.
Watch our iTunes ratings go down because people who search
How
Bob
dare
Hope.
they?
Yeah. Ooh, a podcast about Bob Hope. This will be nice.
All right. Big smile on my face, like Bob Hope.
Open heart, open mind. I want to love him. I actually want to find a way in.
So that's what we'll be talking about next week. Until then, my name's Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for the memories.
Was that a Bob Hope?
That's his theme song.
Oh. As per usual, I would like to thank some of our new patrons, who include John Christian Yates, Braden Benham, Brian Trone Tropcourt, Does It Really Matter, Caleb Clements, James Craig, Big Lou, Sasha Kingston Wayne, Vold Joe Mibikayi, Lucas Barwinchik, Rich Gabe, Max Dunning, Alex Cunningham, Nathaniel Hendricks, and Tommy Scarpinato. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not keep doing this without you. And just a reminder, if you are a fan of my 24-hour movie Mind Melters, there's a new one coming up on August 10th. Yes, that's right. There will be 24 hours of movies handpicked by me, and I will also be watching the full 24 hours with anybody that wants to sit through all of it. It's happening online, website to be determined. Just listen to this, back matter part in upcoming episodes if you want more information, or check me out on Blue Sky, Twitter, Justin DeClue. I will be posting about it ad nauseum leading up to that date. Hope I can see you there. Hope I can introduce you to some new movies, and hope I can have a great time with you and everybody that joins. And now, back to the show.
Justin, I don't know if you're talking about this on another podcast, but I saw that you went to see the biggest movie of the year, Deadpool versus Wolverine.
Oh, yes, I did.
Did you like it?
No, not very much.
Oh, well.
Are you going to see it? Please don't, Will. Why?
I'm just
why?
thinking, you know why I might see it.
You want that 1.5-star review that'll get like 3,000 likes.
I just think I've got another podcast.
There's two ways about it. You either approach it, sorry, I'm thinking of your Letterboxd review, a pithy one-line thing, or like 10,000 words about like the destruction of et cetera, et cetera.
I love all this anger and resentment that Justin is getting out about me right now.
There's no anger and resentment. I'm just thinking of your well-being, of like, why would you do this to yourself? Pay money, sit down. You're not going to enjoy it. You'll find it miserable.
It's funny because I haven't even seen most of the important movies this year, most of the good ones.
Like what?
Like, I don't know, I haven't seen I Saw the TV Glow, for instance. I haven't seen I haven't seen Challengers. I haven't seen any of these. Yeah, I haven't seen any of these ones that are. I'm glad I went to TIFF last year because I was able to see like Last Summer. Do not expect too much from the end of the world.
Hey, we're going to TIFF again this year, so
yeah, knock out a bunch of the important movies in 1 week. So you're not a Sean Levy guy?
Is anybody a Sean Levy guy?
You like Real Steel?
I love Real Steel, but Broken Clock. How
about the hamburger bit from the Pink Panther?
Never seen the Pink Panther.
I want to buy a hamburger.
I've never seen Pink Panther, or Cheaper by the Dozen, or Night at the Museum 1, 2, 3.
You haven't seen any of those?
You know what? I'm saying this. I remember looking on Letterboxd and I was like, I think I logged one of them, but I have no memory of it. We were too old for the Night at the Museum films when they came out.
I definitely saw the first one, I think, on like DVD, maybe. I don't know why I saw it.
Sean Levy seems, you probably picked it up out of the garbage in front of someone's lawn. Probably. That's where you see the Night at the Museum DVDs. He seems like a very affable guy. Is he Canadian?
Yes, I think he is, because he won TIFF last year, the first annual
Sean Levy Award.
He won the Norman Jewison Award for Outstanding Achievement in the Field of Excellence.
I've been watching on YouTube a lot of the Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds.
Their promo stuff?
Yeah, they're very charming together. It's not in the movie, unfortunately.
Okay.
Like I said in my review on Letterboxd, it's wild how cheap the movie feels. There's only like 3 locations.
Whenever I see clips from it, it looks like the most beige.
Yep, it is.
Ugh.
And like, as I guess Ryan Reynolds, he's seemingly doing a lot of this stuff as like branding exercises. It's like a accumulation of power. Like, why else would you have like a mobile company and like whatever gin that he's trying to shill.
Right.
And speaking of nation's favorite sons, Ryan Reynolds. Do we have a Ryan Reynolds episode in our future?
Oh God, what torture that would be. We should watch his Adam Agoyan movie, which he made during a weird lull in his career.
What about the John August film The Nines with him and Melissa McCarthy? That's one of his serious pictures.
Okay, so that's two.
I got it. The serious Ryan Reynolds. We don't watch any of his comedies.
I love that, actually, as an episode idea. Write that down.
Is there enough to go through it?
There's gotta be at least one other failed prestige film that he was in.
Now, what's funny about Wolverine or whatever it's called, Deadpool versus Wolverine, is don't you hate seeing the article that's like, cinema is saved. It's going to have a $1 billion opening box office. And, people were worried that, cinema would be an issue. And it's like, yeah, I guess the theaters like it because people are coming in. How is this saving cinema that like this movie's making $1 billion? If anything, it's destroying it because all we're gonna get is more fucking like team up films. I don't want that.
I just don't know how is there still nostalgia to mine?
There's no more juice in any of this stuff.
Like this is the 5th superhero movie in like 2 years where it's like, hey, remember the other superheroes from 10 years ago? Well, they're back.
Well, did you hear what recently happened at Comic-Con? They're like, we finally have our Doctor Doom for the Marvel movies. It's Robert Downey Jr.
Oh my God.
Robert Downey Jr. You're not rich enough?
Yeah. Don't you have enough money? Like why not just retire?
Yeah, like retire. I understand. He's going to shoot what? One day, and then he's going to do voiceover work.
And he's going to get $50 million.
Yeah, if not $100 million.
But I don't know. He has enough money.
Yeah.
You put that shit in investments and you'll make the same amount of money you'd make on this.
And people like, I mean, if they would listen to this, they're like, but he wants to like help people with it. He ain't doing that. He's not doing that.
That's bullshit. And also the nerve of him after doing a whole Oscar campaign.
He's like, I'm back. I'm a real, he won his Oscar, didn't he?
And then he's like, suckers. He did a whole thing of like, yep, I sure did too many Marvel movies. Oh, and Dr. Dolittle.
I'm back.
Yeah.
So no more serious. Maybe we'll get a judge out of him. One more.
The judge, yeah.
You know that he was only cast in that Christopher Nolan movie because it's basically like casting Eric Roberts in his film. Christopher Nolan loves taking like, oh, you won't expect him in a serious film anymore, and giving Robert Downey Jr. that opportunity in the
Oppenheimer.
I can't remember.
You remember
it?
Yeah.
Good movie.
I think, speaking of Eric Roberts, I'm kind of...
Oh, his biography's coming out soon, right?
I can't wait. His book, yeah. But I think it's sad that Christopher Nolan never brought him back after The Dark Knight.
Well, I mean, he did show up in Babylon.
Yeah,
he got a role in that.
It felt great when I went to see Babylon, seeing him fill that 70mm screen for just 1 second, You know
what? Speaking of biographies, I was recently in a Shoppers, and I couldn't believe one of the biographies sitting out like, this is the new book. Shoppers doesn't, which is our, the chain grocery store.
It's our Dwayne Reed.
Like, they only pick certain big books, but there it was, the Tom Sizemore biography.
Wow.
And I was like, man, Tom Sizemore has enough like juice to have his big biography be like the book. And I thought about it and went, you know what? He's probably more of a star on the cover of tabloids these days. And I mean, he is an actor. Let's not deny that.
I think Tom Sizemore passed away.
Oh, did he?
Hang on. We're going to find this out. We're going to break some news on the air. Yeah. He died March 3rd, 2023.
Oh, maybe that's what it is. So like, oh, he passed away. So I don't remember not Tom Sizemore.
Somebody else.
I was thinking of Tom Selleck.
Tom Selleck.
He's not dead yet.
Okay.
Is there a Tom Sizemore biography? I'm sure there is.
There's got to be. Well, Tom Sizemore's got
for the last 2 minutes have been losing their mind. They're like, a Tom Sizemore biography.
Tom Sizemore has a very colorful life. I don't know about Tom Selleck, but I do think, listen, as Nixon told us, there is a great silent majority in America, and those people...
They love Tom Selleck.
Yeah.
It's funny
Is he in anything right now? Does he have a show?
Like a show that's run like 10 seasons.
That I just never heard of?
Yes, Blue Bloods.
That's on TV now.
That's still on TV, and you know how long it's been on TV? Since 2010.
And probably 25 million people watch it every week.
Oh, absolutely. Every like older parent and grandparent. He's just one of those actors that never had a movie other than Three Men and a Baby.
Yeah.
Like, they tried, but he just couldn't do it. So it's like, all right, kind of like Ted Danson. He's like, I'm going to be a TV guy. Which, if you're happy, you go to work every day.
And, Ted Danson had some more prestige stuff. Like, he had that show where they're in heaven. What the hell's that called?
I like that show, The Good Place.
Yeah.
You know what Ted Danson is doing now? A podcast about Cheers with Woody Harrelson. Speaking of people, it's like, And then like 10 minutes in, they're like, well, Casper mattresses have the new, why are you doing this? I don't understand.
I'm surprised Woody Harrelson's on that. It's like, he doesn't need that.
No.
He's a pretty big star
But Ted
still.
Danson doesn't need that either.
Yeah.
Like what? I guess it's just the idea.
I think they just get offered a huge amount of money. Also, like Cheers is on Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
So probably it's some podcast company working with the streaming company. Like, let's get a Cheers podcast and let's give them each.
I want to get to the point where people are like, Justin and Will don't need to do. They're so rich. Why would they do this? And then we'll go, you know what? You're right. We won't do it because we're so rich.
Hey, that would be great.
Would love that.